I recall the moment vividly, as if it occurred just yesterday. With our parents absent, it was merely my twin brother Liam and me in the house. Then, in an instant, he did something so unforeseen and exhilarating that it transformed everything, creating a memory that remains etched in my mind due to its sheer excitement. The evening began like any other, settling into a familiar rhythm that comes from a lifetime of sharing space with someone. Our parents had gone out for the night, leaving the house in an unusual stillness, a silence occasionally interrupted by the soft hum of the refrigerator or the creaking of aged floorboards beneath us. This was not the first time Liam and I had been left to our own devices. We had grown accustomed to it, turning these evenings into our own little universe where time seemed to expand, challenging us to fill it. I was seated on the couch, casually scrolling through my phone, though my focus was not truly on the screen. Across from me, Liam lounged in his customary spot, one arm draped over the backrest, his eyes flitting between the television and whatever thoughts occupied his mind. His presence was as familiar to me as the very air I breathed, yet tonight, there was something different about him. I could not quite articulate it, but a subtle shift lingered in the way his gaze lingered just a moment too long or how his voice carried an unidentifiable tone. "Movie or game?" Liam inquired suddenly, his voice cutting through the gentle hum of the television. He turned his head toward me, and for a brief moment, his dark eyes locked onto mine, causing me to momentarily forget my response. I shrugged, attempting to maintain a casual demeanor. "Whatever you want," I replied. "Helpful," he retorted with a smirk, seizing the remote and scrolling through the options with a deliberate slowness intended to test my patience. I couldn't suppress a smile at his antics. "If you're going to take that long, I'm choosing a rom-com." Over my dead body, he shot back, laughter spilling from his lips. It was effortless with Liam, our playful banter flowing naturally as we navigated each other's lives like two halves of a whole. The laughter resonated throughout the room, yet an undercurrent of something deeper persisted, subtle, yet unmistakable. Eventually, he selected a film we had both watched numerous times, the type that requires little attention since the dialogue is ingrained in our memories. We settled into the comforting silence it provided, the screen's glow casting gentle shadows on the walls. However, my attention was not truly on the film, my thoughts were elsewhere, drawn to him in a manner that felt both familiar and disconcerting. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed him stealing a glance at me, swift and nearly imperceptible, yet it sent a wave of awareness coursing through me. Liam had always been the bold one, unafraid to voice his thoughts, but tonight, there was a hesitation in him that mirrored my own. It was evident in the way he shifted his weight and how his hand absently traced the edge of the couch, as if gauging the atmosphere between us. "What is it?" I finally asked, unable to endure the silence any longer. He shook his head, a faint smile gracing his lips. "Nothing." "You're lying." "Okay, maybe something," he conceded, leaning forward with his elbows resting on his knees. The light from the screen illuminated his face, accentuating the sharp features that resembled my own. "Do you ever think about how strange it is to be twins? I mean, strange in the way people assume we are identical, right? Same face, same thoughts, same everything. But we're not really." I nodded, his words resonating within me. Liam and I had always been perceived as a single entity, interchangeable in the eyes of most, but he was correct, we were distinct. Liam was the audacious one, diving headfirst into life, while I preferred to observe from a distance. Yet, in moments like this, when his defenses were lowered, I glimpsed the aspects of him that felt akin to my own, a quiet vulnerability he seldom revealed to others. "I suppose it's just easier for people to group us together," I remarked, my voice softer than I had intended. "It's not as if we've ever truly shown them otherwise." His gaze remained fixed on me. I sensed the weight of unspoken words in the space separating us. Perhaps we should address it, it was such a straightforward remark, yet the manner in which he articulated it caused my heart to race. Before I could formulate a reply, he reclined once more, his relaxed demeanor betraying none of the tension that coiled in the atmosphere. I redirected my attention to the screen, feigning interest, while my thoughts raced, caught between the comfort of familiarity and the unfamiliar attraction that seemed to draw us nearer. As the minutes dragged on, the silence between us became increasingly oppressive, laden with unexpressed sentiments. I was at a loss for words, uncertain if there was anything to articulate. Yet, as always, Liam found a way to penetrate the quiet. "You're unusually quiet tonight," he remarked, his voice softer, almost hesitant. "What thoughts are swirling in that overactive mind of yours?" "Nothing," I replied, deceiving him, for the truth was ensnared in a complex web of emotions I was not prepared to untangle. "Just tired." He did not press further, but his gaze searched mine, as if attempting to uncover the thoughts I wished to conceal. For a fleeting moment, I anticipated he might confront me about it, but instead, he shifted closer, his knee brushing against mine in a manner that felt intentional. The contact sent a surge through me, and I fought to maintain my composure. "Sure it's nothing," he inquired, his tone now lighter, teasing, yet there was an underlying challenge that quickened my heartbeat. I managed to smile, shrugging in response. The tension between us was almost tangible, a silent current. Neither of us dared to name, yet it was unmistakable in the way his gaze lingered and how the air around us felt charged with an undeniable force. As the evening progressed, the distance between us seemed to diminish. Liam's laughter filled the room, drawing me back into the comfort of the moment, yet beneath it all, that unspoken tension persisted, waiting. In the stillness, I came to a realization: this was not merely another evening, something was evolving between us, and there was no turning back. Liam had always been the more vocal one, the one capable of filling any silence. On this particular evening, the usual light-hearted banter was absent, replaced by an unidentifiable tension that lingered in the air. I felt it acutely each time our knees brushed against one another or when his gaze lingered just a fraction longer than necessary. This was not the discomforting kind of tension, rather, it was a thrilling sensation that I was reluctant to acknowledge. "Have you ever considered what it might be like if we weren't twins?" he asked abruptly, pulling me from my reverie. I blinked, taken aback by his inquiry. "What do you mean?" I replied. He shrugged, leaning back against the couch. "I don't know, just that if we weren't, perhaps things would feel different." His words hung heavily between us, unspoken yet palpable. I wanted to probe further, to understand his meaning, but something in his tone made me pause, as if he himself was uncertain of the implications. "I suppose it's difficult to envision," I finally responded. "We've always been us." "Yeah," he murmured, his gaze flickering to mine for a fleeting moment before shifting away. The word always carried a significance that eluded me, but before I could contemplate it further, he rose from the couch. "Would you like a drink?" "I'm going to grab one." "Sure," I replied, my voice softer than I had intended. I watched him walk into the kitchen, my mind racing as I tried to comprehend the subtle shift in our dynamic. Liam had always been my counterpart, the one who understood me better than anyone else. Yet tonight, it felt as though we were teetering on the brink of something unfamiliar, something neither of us could fully articulate. When he returned, he handed me a beer, his fingers brushing against mine for a moment longer than necessary. He settled closer this time, his thigh pressing against mine as he resumed his position on the couch. It was a minor gesture, yet it sent my heart racing in a way I could not dismiss. "Do you ever wonder why we avoid discussing deeper topics?" he asked, his voice low and contemplative. I frowned, seeking clarification. "What do you mean?" "We're close, right? Closer than most people, yet there are still things we don't address. Everyone has their secrets." Despite the uncertainty I experienced, his expression softened, and he leaned in just enough for me to feel his breath against my skin. Perhaps I was not alone in this. Neither of us dared to name, yet it was unmistakable in the way his gaze lingered and how the air around us felt charged with an undeniable force. As the evening progressed, the distance between us seemed to diminish. Liam's laughter filled the room, drawing me back into the comfort of the moment, yet beneath it all, that unspoken tension persisted, waiting. In the stillness, I came to a realization: this was not merely another evening, something was evolving between us, and there was no turning back. Liam had always been the more vocal one, the one capable of filling any silence. On this particular evening, the usual light-hearted banter was absent, replaced by an unidentifiable tension that lingered in the air. I felt it acutely each time our knees brushed against one another or when his gaze lingered just a fraction longer than necessary. This was not the discomforting kind of tension, rather, it was a thrilling sensation that I was reluctant to acknowledge. "Have you ever considered what it might be like if we weren't twins?" he asked abruptly, pulling me from my reverie. I blinked, taken aback by his inquiry. "What do you mean?" I replied. He shrugged, leaning back against the couch. I don't know, just that if we weren't, perhaps things would feel different. His words hung heavily between us, unspoken yet palpable. I wanted to probe further, to understand his meaning, but something in his tone made me pause, as if he himself was uncertain of the implications. I suppose it's difficult to envision, I finally responded. We've always been us. Yeah, he murmured, his gaze flickering to mine for a fleeting moment before shifting away. The word always carried a significance that eluded me, but before I could contemplate it further, he rose from the couch. Would you like a drink? I'm going to grab one. Sure, I replied, my voice softer than I had intended. I watched him walk into the kitchen, my mind racing as I tried to comprehend the subtle shift in our dynamic. Liam had always been my counterpart, the one who understood me better than anyone else. Yet tonight, it felt as though we were teetering on the brink of something unfamiliar, something neither of us could fully articulate. When he returned, he handed me a beer, his fingers brushing against mine for a moment longer than necessary. He settled closer this time, his thigh pressing against mine as he resumed his position on the couch. It was a minor gesture, yet it sent my heart racing in a way I could not dismiss. Do you ever wonder why we avoid discussing deeper topics? He asked, his voice low and contemplative. I frowned, seeking clarification. What do you mean? We're close, right? Closer than most people, yet there are still things we don't address. Everyone has their secrets. Despite the uncertainty I experienced, his expression softened, and he leaned in just enough for me to feel his breath against my skin. Perhaps I was not alone in this. The words lingered in the air between us, and a whirlwind of emotions, fear, excitement, confusion, swirled within me, leaving me breathless. Liam remained still, not pushing me, yet the intensity of his gaze indicated he was waiting, allowing me the space to make a decision. I swallowed hard, my heart racing in my chest. I was unsure of what this meant or how it would alter things, but in that moment, with Liam so near and the weight of his words pressing upon me, I realized I was indifferent to the implications. Liam did not move, his eyes remained fixed on mine, unwavering. His expression was inscrutable yet filled with an intensity that I could not look away from. Every part of me urged me to speak or act, yet I found myself paralyzed, caught between fear and an irresistible attraction to him. Ethan, he said softly, my name escaping his lips like a cherished secret meant solely for me. You can talk to me, you always could. It was not merely the words, but the gentle and quiet manner in which he spoke, devoid of his usual bravado. Liam was no longer teasing or testing, he was open and vulnerable, sending a shiver through me. I know, I murmured, though my voice sounded strange to my own ears. It's just complicated. Complicated doesn't mean bad, he replied, leaning back slightly, though the space between us remained charged. Sometimes it just means it's worth figuring out. The way he looked at me then, steady and unyielding, made my heart race. It was not just the intensity of his gaze, but the depth of it, as if he could see through every barrier I had ever erected. For the first time, I felt no urge to conceal myself. I sensed that something significant was approaching, and I was correct. Without fully realizing it, I had leaned closer to him, our knees brushing once more, but this time with intention. Liam did not flinch or withdraw, instead, he slightly tilted his head, his eyes searching mine for any sign. In a moment of uncertainty, I inquired, "What are we doing, Liam?" My voice was barely audible. He confessed, a slight smile playing on his lips, "I don't know." Yet, he continued, "But it doesn't feel wrong, does it?" I wanted to deny it, to assert that this was a mistake and that we would wake up tomorrow as if nothing had occurred. However, the truth lodged itself in my throat, refusing to be silenced. It did not feel wrong, rather, it seemed like a culmination of years of unspoken tension, waiting for this very moment to be released. Finally, I uttered, "No," the word escaping my lips like a confession. That was all it took for Liam to close the distance between us, his breath warming my skin. My heart raced, thoughts swirling in a chaotic mix of anticipation and fear. But when his lips met mine, the cacophony in my mind faded, leaving only the sensation of him. The kiss began slowly, cautiously, as if we were exploring uncharted territory. His hand found my jaw, fingers grazing my skin, sending shivers down my spine. I didn't think, I simply kissed him back, surrendering to the moment. It felt natural, as if this was our destined conclusion. Liam's touch became more assertive, his lips pressing firmly against mine while his other hand cradled the back of my neck, drawing me closer. I released a soft sigh, and he smiled against my lips, his confidence growing with my response. When we finally separated, my chest rose and fell with shallow breaths, my mind still in a whirl. Liam remained close, his forehead resting against mine, fingers entwined in my hair, his eyes searching mine with a flicker of uncertainty. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice low yet steady. I nodded, though the reality of what had just transpired was just beginning to settle in. "Yeah, I think so," I replied, and he chuckled softly. His thumb grazed my jawline, and I found myself admitting, "You think I don't know what to think?" My voice quivered slightly, yet I felt no regret. "Good," he replied simply, his smile transforming into something more sincere. "Because I don't either." The weight of his words enveloped me, anchoring me in a way I had not anticipated. This was Liam, my twin, my other half, and yet, in this moment, he seemed to embody something more, someone I had been inexplicably drawn to. After that, our conversation dwindled, and the silence that followed was no longer laden with tension. Instead, it was imbued with a quiet understanding. We both recognized that this was not the end. Something lingered in the air. Liam's arm encircled my shoulders, drawing me closer as we sank into the couch. I rested my head against his chest, attuned to the steady cadence of his heartbeat, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, everything seemed right. "Do you think this changes everything?" I finally asked, my voice barely a whisper. Liam tilted his head, his gaze meeting mine with a depth that made my heart constrict. "Does it have to?" he inquired. I hesitated, his question echoing in my mind. "I don't know. Maybe it already has." He nodded slowly, his fingers tracing gentle patterns along my arm, the touch providing a soothing reassurance amidst the uncertainty. "Maybe that's not a bad thing," he said after a moment, his voice tinged with tentative hope. I hadn't anticipated such a simple statement could carry the weight of all that remained unspoken. The truth was, I was uncertain about what this meant for us, unsure if we could confine whatever this was within the walls of our home. Yet, Liam's confidence and quiet assurance steadied me in a way I could not articulate. "What happens when someone finds out?" I asked, the question escaping before I could restrain it. He frowned, his fingers pausing against my skin. "No one has to know, Ethan. This is ours. No one else gets a say in it." His words ignited a profound sense of relief within me. I wanted to believe him, to trust that we could preserve this moment, untouched by the outside world. The soft glow of moonlight filtering through the curtains cast gentle shadows across his face, accentuating the sharp features that mirrored my own. "You're overthinking again," he remarked, a subtle smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Can you blame me?" I replied, my voice barely a whisper. "No," he conceded, his expression softening. "But you don't have to, not tonight." His hand moved to my face, his fingers grazing my jaw in a touch so tender it made my heart ache. I did not flinch or withdraw, instead, I leaned into his caress, my eyes fluttering shut as the weight of the moment enveloped me. When his lips met mine, it was no longer tentative as it had been before, it was purposeful, imbued with a quiet intensity that stole my breath away. His hand found the back of my neck, drawing me closer as his body pressed against mine, his warmth enveloping me like a second skin. I did not contemplate the implications of this moment or what might follow, I could not. All I could do was immerse myself in the sensations, his fingers entwined in my hair, the hitch in his breath against my lips, and the synchrony of our heartbeats in perfect harmony. Time seemed to dissolve. The world beyond faded into obscurity as we became lost in one another. Each touch and every whispered breath felt like a revelation, an unveiling of something that had always existed yet remained unacknowledged. I believe you can envision the extent of our actions. Ultimately, all I can express is that it was overwhelmingly intense, so intense that it brought a hint of pain. When we finally separated, my chest heaved with shallow breaths, and my skin tingled with the lingering sensation of his touch. Liam remained close, his forehead gently resting against mine, his fingers still entwined in my hair. "I'm not going anywhere," he said softly, his voice steady despite the emotions it carried. I nodded, unable to articulate a response, for the first time in my life, I truly believed him. Morning light filtered through the curtains, casting a soft golden hue across the room. I stirred, momentarily disoriented, until the warmth of Liam's arm around me brought everything rushing back. My chest tightened as I recalled the events of the previous night, the weight of it settling over me like a delicate secret. Liam lay beside me, asleep, his face relaxed in a manner I seldom witnessed. His features, so familiar yet transformed in this context, made my heart clench. This was Liam, not merely my twin, but someone I had seen from every perspective, and now he was something more. I remained still, observing him breathe, my mind a tempest of unnameable emotions. Part of me yearned to slip out of bed and create some distance before the reality of the day set in, but a stronger part resisted the urge, unable to part from his presence. It was a tether, grounding me in a way I could not comprehend yet deeply craved. As if sensing my turmoil, Liam stirred, his eyes fluttering open to meet mine with a softness that made my chest ache. He did not speak immediately, simply holding my gaze, the silence between us filled with all that remained unspoken. "Morning," he murmured, his voice rough with sleep. "Morning," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. In a moment of silence, neither of us moved, the heaviness of the previous night lingering between us, both weighty and oddly comforting. Liam's hand found its way to my face, his thumb gently grazing my cheek in a manner so delicate that it momentarily stole my breath. "Are you okay?" he inquired, his voice tinged with concern. I nodded, though the tension in my chest remained. "Yeah, just trying to understand what this means." A small smile played on his lips. "It means we stopped pretending." The simplicity of his statement took me by surprise. "And then what?" I asked. Liam's expression softened, his fingers pausing against my skin. "Then we figure it out together." His quiet confidence provided a steadiness I hadn't anticipated. I lacked all the answers and doubted I ever would, but Liam's presence and his unwavering belief that everything was alright helped to calm the turmoil in my mind. The day unfolded slowly, each moment imbued with a fresh awareness. We did not explicitly discuss what had transpired, instead, we navigated the morning with a shared understanding that our experience did not require dissection, it simply existed. It was not until the afternoon that the outside world's weight began to intrude. A message from my mother appeared on my phone, reminding me that they would be home soon. The bubble we had created, a delicate space where time felt suspended, was about to burst. "They'll be back in a few hours," I said, my voice breaking the stillness. Liam looked at me, his expression inscrutable. "I don't know," I confessed. "What happens now?" He settled down, his coffee mug resting against the counter, exuding a calm that contrasted with the tension I felt. "Nothing has to change, Ethan, unless we want it to," he replied, his words enveloping me in a quiet reassurance I hadn't realized I needed. "What if they figure it out?" I asked. "They won't," he stated simply, his confidence unshakable. "This is ours, no one else needs to know." His words brought me a sense of peace, although a small part of me still ached under the burden of the secret we now held. It was not shame that I felt. A sense of trepidation enveloped us, not merely a fear, but an apprehension regarding the uncharted territory we were about to navigate, relying solely on one another as time progressed. The house gradually filled with the comforting sounds of life re-emerging, our parents' voices, their laughter, and the clattering of suitcases being unpacked. This cacophony felt disconcerting after the serene intimacy we had shared the previous day. Liam and I effortlessly resumed our familiar roles.